This story took place when I was 8 years old in Indonesia, where I grew up. My mother and I were at the local market to buy our food supplies, which was a regular trip for us. On this particular day, it was pretty crowded and my mum was busy buying things, and I managed to lose her for a split second. Out came this creepy man. He must have been 50 or something, but could have been more. His face was full of wrinkles. He was wearing ragged clothing. At first he didn't say anything. He just stared and smiled at me. This made me feel very uneasy. Next thing I knew, he tried to grab me. Thankfully, my mum saw me and quickly came over and protected me from the man. She asked the man what he was doing and he didn't say anything back. He just left. We went home after this, and on our way, my mum asked me what had happened. Me being a shy girl, I didn't say anything and we left it at that. The very next day, I went to the market by myself. I did have worries that I would encounter the man again, but figured it would be unlikely. But of course I was wrong. Once again I ran into him. As he walked over to me, I was disgusted to see that he was wearing nothing but trousers. He must have realised I was alone as he started talking to me. He said that I was very beautiful, that my body was just perfect. My eyes, my hair, my small lips, everything. He even said he would love to marry me. Imagine that, an 8-year-old girl marrying a 50-year-old man. This creeped me out. I ran as quickly as I could without looking behind me until I got home. I told my mum what had happened, and she was shocked and scared for me. She forbade me from going to that market. From now on, she'll just go by herself. 2 months went by. Things started going back to normal, and I did not see the old, creepy man in that time. Me and my mum decided we would go to the market together again, and we felt relieved that we didn't see him there. But on our walk back home from the market, we were once again confronted by that same man. He said hello to me and started saying similar things to last time, like that he wanted to marry me, that I am the most beautiful woman in the world, and that he thinks I'd make a great wife. He even said to my mum that he thought I was so cute and that he would literally die because of my cuteness. Then he said he doesn't mind if he has to kill my mum if she does not agree with our marriage. This was maybe the most unsettling comment of all. I am so sick of this man. He made me want to cry. I just wanted to go home. My mum was so angry. She looked like she wanted to beat the man, but I grabbed her and we got away again. I felt so gross. It was the most disgusting thing ever. When we arrived at home, my mum told my dad what had happened. He was so furious and spent some time trying to look up the man on the internet, but no luck. Weeks later, me and my older sister went to the market since our parents were very busy. My sister is a strong, brave and tough girl, so I felt safe going with her. Plus we did not see the man at the market, so maybe he had finally moved on from that area. But once again, I was very wrong. When my sister and I were on our way home, the creepy man came out of nowhere and tried to kidnap me. I tried to scream, but he covered my mouth. My sister helped me by throwing her shoes at the man. It hit him right in the face with force. This made the man run away, and my sister and I rushed home back to safety. Now I am 16 years old. I have unfortunately been through these situations a lot. I am always getting catcalled, and I never wear any sexy clothing or anything. I always seem to have creeps stalking me or obsessed with me. This made me want to die and makes me feel as disgusting as that old man did. Sexual harassment is everywhere. You need to be careful. Anyone can get harassed, especially children. Please take care of yourself, and please take care of your children.
My name is Sarah. I'm an 18-year-old girl, and this happened to me last summer in the middle of August. I was walking home after going to one of my friend's house to hang out and do typical things a normal girl would do for a few hours. I knew I could have just driven home, but it was only a 15-minute walk, so I decided to do the latter so I can enjoy the fresh summer air. It was around 9:30 p.m, and by this time, everyone in the neighborhood had settled in their homes for the night, leaving the street devoid of any activity. Whilst walking, I had that cliche feeling that I was being watched. I constantly looked around me to see if I was being followed, but luckily, no sign of life. I was just 3 minutes walking distance from my house when I reached an intersection. I pushed the button and waited for the light to turn green, and then I proceeded to cross the road. That's when I saw him for the first time, a fully grown man who clearly looked to be somewhere in his 40s. He came out from behind a light pole without any warning and scared the living daylights out of me. He was wearing a hoodie and baggy pants, even though it was something like 80 degrees Fahrenheit outside. "Hi there, young lady," said the man. "That's a really nice outfit you got there," in his raspy voice. His breath reeked of cigarettes. He then went on to say how attractive I was, further making me feel uncomfortable. This sort of attention from men was nothing new to me, but this man was clearly 30 years older than me at least. He offered to escort me home, but I declined. Following this, he asked if I had a boyfriend, and I lied to him and said yes. I can tell he was starting to lose his cool just by his voice. Most likely, as a desperate last-ditch effort to win me over, he cut right to the chase and straight up asked me if I wanted to go out on a date with him, and then he flashed a really hideous grin. Just about had enough of this guy. I clenched my fist, told him in his face that I'm not interested, and turned to leave, but he grabbed me by the shoulders and tried to drag me away to only God knows where. During the struggle, I saw a white van with the windows tinted and the license plate suspiciously covered in duct tape. I thought those were the final moments of my life right then and there. I tried so hard not to cry as I practically was on the verge of tears. I managed to work up the courage to fight back and kicked him as hard as I could on his shin. Believe it or not, it worked. He yelled in pain, cursing, stumbled backwards to the ground whilst clutching his shin, and thankfully he let go of me. I booked it out of there, took a slight detour route to my house just in case he decided to follow me. I dared not to look behind me the whole way back. When I got home, I didn't call the cops for some reason, nor did I tell anyone else about it. Not even my own family, probably because I was still traumatized at what had just happened. It all happened so quickly. Nowadays, I regret not telling anyone about the incident because now there's still a crazy psycho out there looking for its next victim, or even worse, trying to look for me again. From then on, whenever I walked somewhere, I always made sure I had someone with me. Never did I walk alone again, especially at night. One night, I was on the side of the road whilst I was on patrol. I was just taking a brief break and enjoying my coffee when I started hearing something. It sounded like there was a vehicle approaching where I was. Then suddenly, this truck just zoomed past me and it was driving erratically. So immediately, I pursued the driver. I thought it was odd and suspicious that someone would be on this road this late whilst the weather was this wild, especially a trucker. I signaled for the driver to pull over and he eventually did. We were pulled over on the side of the highway. I got out of my car and I began to approach the driver. I shined the light on his face, and this was when he revealed that his face was covered in blood. When I asked him about the blood, I was not expecting his response. He began explaining how he had brutally clubbed a deer to death with a weapon. I was shocked, so I inspected the back of his truck. It was completely empty, apart from a bloody wrench and scissors. I questioned him further, but his story was constantly changing and his behavior was very suspicious. I ended up arresting him under the Wildlife Act and began investigating his claim of illegally killing an animal. I got in contact with a conservation officer who was skilled in tracking, and I got him to assist me in finding the deer that the man claimed to have killed. He managed to find tire tracks on a road just off the highway that matched the truck. He followed the tracks up the road, and then in the freshly fallen snow, he managed to find footprints leading into the woods. He tracked the footprints, staying alert and looking for the deer. The footprints were going pretty deep into the woods. He was pretty concerned that maybe the snow would cover the deer and he would not be able to find it. But what he ended up finding is something that shook him to his very core. There, laid in the snow, was the body of a young woman. It was clear that she had been brutally beaten, killed, and dumped at this location. Despite the fact the woman lay deceased in the falling snow, the body was actually still warm, which is a clear indication of how close we had come to stopping this guy from doing this despicable act. He was charged with murder, and he will never see the light of day again. This story took place on a warm summer's night in Australia. I was staying at my auntie's place for the night, and we decided to take her black Labrador for a walk to the park. The park was a short 5-minute walk from her house. There was not much going on in the neighbourhood that night. It was very quiet, virtually no people around. But when we turned a corner, we walked past this van. I didn't think much of it at the time, but later on, my auntie told me she was instantly suspicious of the man in the van. The walk continued as we were about to reach the park. I was looking forward to doing some training with my auntie's dog, as he was still young and keen to learn. We reached the park, and I played fetch with the dog. I was distracted, but having a good time. However, my auntie was growing more suspicious by the minute. She noticed the van driving past, and it ended up parking on the side of the road, right near where we were playing. My auntie came over and didn't say anything about the van, but suggested we leave. We did end up walking a little bit around the park, making sure the dog got more than a 5-minute run around, but we decided it would be best to now head back home. My auntie suggested we take a quicker way back. I imagine this was to perhaps try and catch the man in the van off guard and see if we could lose track of him. We ended up going down this alley/driveway type thing. I instantly noticed there was a man sitting down in this area. I suspected the man to be homeless. He muttered something to me, and I swear I heard him say, "I think he is following you," but I may have misheard him. We continued to walk through this area, and when we reached the end, we saw something that did not belong. There was some dog food just on the ground at the end of this area. My auntie was concerned and immediately thought this could have been placed by the man in the van. Then once again, we noticed the van. He was once again parked right near us. Was he trying to put the dog to sleep, or worse, so he could get to one of us or both of us? We were not hanging around to find out. We immediately rushed home. Later that night, I was sleeping on my auntie's couch and I started hearing suspicious noises. I swear it sounded like someone climbing the fence to get into our backyard. Then I swear I could hear someone intentionally walking slowly just outside where I was sleeping. I was frozen with fear when suddenly all hell broke loose. I summoned the courage to look outside. I wanted to know that the dog was okay. When I looked out there, I saw no man, just the dog. He was walking towards the back door, but notably, I saw blood and bloody footprints. What on earth happened out there? I would never find out. I was certain this backyard scuffle was connected to the man in the van. I'm not sure if he wanted to get to me, my auntie, or maybe it was the dog he wanted. Either way, I am now always on the lookout for the man in the van. I am still a high school student, and this happened a few weeks ago. Since the coronavirus pandemic began to break out in the USA, everything has been shut down, including my two older brothers' college. They live in the city of Chicago in an apartment, but have no choice but to come home during this time since everything is online. Since they are not using the apartment, my family decided it would be best if we just had them move out of it, as that is what other people were doing, and there's really no point in paying rent on a place where you don't live. My father was originally supposed to drive to the city to pick up my older brothers, but he got caught up with some work-related stuff, so I was sent. I drove to the city, but it was night time, so the streets were dead empty. As soon as I got there, my brothers and I began loading the car so we could get home quickly. Whilst we were doing that, I noticed I could hear a sound from the nearby alley. I shrugged it off as nothing and thought maybe I was just tired and should have asked one of my brothers to drive us home. But soon after, I heard the same sound, and this time my brothers were with me and they also heard the noise. We all looked closer into the alley and we noticed a man emerge from the bushes. We asked if he was alright, but then suddenly we noticed that this man was wearing a mask over his face. Immediately I was concerned, as this masked man did not say a word and would just stare at us. We just completely froze as the man just continued to stare at us. He continued to stare, but then he moved to the side, and we noticed that behind him were 3 other men dressed similarly with masks on. But it wasn't the other 3 men that terrified us, it's what they had beside them. There was a body just lying flat on the ground. And I also noticed that one of the men were putting a knife away. We all freaked out and jumped into the car, and right then one of the men charged at us, but I stepped on the gas pedal by this time, just wanting to get out of there with my brothers. We looked back and the men were in the street just staring at us. Luckily, we had left nothing behind. We didn't say anything for about 10 minutes, but then we eventually called the cops. They said they'd look into it, but unfortunately, they found nothing. I still wonder to this day what would have happened if we didn't get into the car as fast as we did, and if one of those men had caught up to us. I don't know why they murdered another man like that, and I honestly do not want to know. All I can say is, stay home and stay safe.
We had been living in our council house in England for a few months when this took place. I was 8 at the time. Our house was a setup of 12 maisonettes and the whole block was attached from door 1 all the way to door 12. It was a fairly multicultural block and we basically all knew each other. We were a family of 8, myself being the youngest. One day, there was a teenage boy who lived on our block who was part of a gang. I overheard him and a rival gang member having a heated argument. A few days after this incident, all hell broke loose on our entire block. One day, I was just hanging out on our balcony and enjoying the view, when I was suddenly alerted by one of the kids playing on the street. He warned me that around 30 gang members were approaching our block with machetes and homemade petrol bombs that they hadn't set alight to yet. My oldest brother was at work, but me and my sisters were at home at the time of the attack, but thankfully our parents were home. As the gang members approached the top of the nursery road, they began screaming and running. I could not explain how terrifying this was. We could do nothing. The gang knew that the boy lived on our block, but didn't know which number flat it was. We lived at number 1, so we'd be the first to be attacked. My mum took me and my sisters into the room that was in the centre of our home, and we all hugged and began crying and praying. My dad frantically ran from window to window trying to see what was going on, all the while trying to get through to the police. Their lines were jammed. Everyone on our block was trying to call them. My dad said that they were trying to light up their petrol bombs, but they just couldn't light them up. We began to hear banging and screams at our front door, and then they began running to the back door. Our back door was made of glass, and we were sure that we were about to die. All of a sudden, they began to run away and we heard police sirens. My mum just collapsed to the ground and began crying. This was one of the most frightening experiences of my life. I'm 49 now, and I hope I never have to go through anything like that again.
This happened back when my son was 9 months old. He was sleeping in his own room that my husband had just completed upgrading, and we decided it was a good idea to keep a baby monitor in there so we would hear him when he wakes up from his naps or during the night. The monitor did not have video, it was strictly sound. Nothing odd happened for quite a while, but over time I noticed something was different. My son would normally wake up during the night and I would usually go into his room and comfort him, and then he would go back to sleep. This wasn't happening anymore. I would hear my son and give him a few minutes to try and settle, and it seemed that this process was working. I no longer needed to comfort him. This seemed to be the theme for the next week or so, but one night my son woke and was crying. I swear I could hear humming and shushing coming from his room, and then silence. My son was no longer crying. I rushed into his room and there was nothing suspicious. He was sleeping peacefully, nothing out of place. Everything was normal. One morning, I was awake but resting, and my husband got up as he had to go to work. About 20 minutes later, I once again heard my son wake up. I heard him being attended to, and very quickly my son was making no noise. He must be peacefully sleeping again. Another 20 minutes later, I decided I would text my husband and thank him for sorting out our son before he went to work. His response is something that I'll never forget, and it will forever haunt me. He said, "I didn't sort him out this morning. He was still asleep when I left." My eyes widened. Adrenaline hit. What is happening in my son's room? I ran into his room and swung the door open. Thankfully, my son was in there, but he was no longer in his cot. He was on the floor. He has clearly had his nappy changed and is in a new outfit, plus was drinking from a freshly warm bottle. If my husband didn't do this, then who did? I quickly took the bottle from my son, picked him up, took him out of the house and called the police. The police arrived quickly and 2 officers went into the house to search. 10 minutes later they came out, but they weren't alone. With them, in handcuffs, was a woman, an old woman, could have been in her 60s. As the police took her into the back of the squad car, she was just staring at my son. Right before they put her in the car, she gave my son the scariest smile, which chilled me right to my core, something I will never forget. The police said that they had a look around the house and decided to look in my crawl space. Quickly, it became evident that someone was living there. It didn't take them long to find the old lady, and thankfully, she went with them peacefully. Fortunately, my son was okay. I contacted my husband and he came straight home, except with him, he had a new baby monitor, but this one had the video function. I now find myself hooked to looking at this monitor, terrified there may be someone in the room with my son. This story began one night about 10 years ago when me and my friend were 5 minutes from the center of the city and we were heading to a gig. He was a musician and had a lot of friends who were also in a band. It's because of this that when we were walking past this abandoned warehouse, it caught his eye. He noticed there was a broken window on the side of the building. He made the impulsive decision to climb up the building and then enter through the broken window. He said it was very dark and he could not see much, so he decided to put on his phone light, and from what he could see, he knew it was perfect. He wanted to use this warehouse so he and his friends' bands can play gigs there, sort of like an underground concert. And so it went ahead. Many bands agreed to play at the abandoned venue. They managed to get a generator to ensure there was power and that they could play, and it was really surreal in there. Word must have got out because there was a large amount of people at these gigs, and it was a pretty crazy time. On one of the nights, me and my friend decided to go exploring the warehouse to see what else was there. We went walking through a pretty dark area when we noticed something. It was a tent set up in the middle of the warehouse, really odd. We decided to inspect the tent and see if someone or something was in there. When we shined the light on the tent, there was nothing but rubbish and beer cans, but there also was a diary. I decided to pick up the diary and have a little bit of a read. What was in the diary would end up shocking me to my very core. In the diary was explicit details of a homeless man and his infatuation with a woman who was virtually a stranger to him. He explained how he had fantasies of stalking and killing her, and it was just full of nonsensical ramblings from an obviously crazed homeless man. I freaked out, and just when I didn't think I could get any more spooked, I started to hear some rustling. Was he coming back to his tent? I froze. My friend shined the torch on where the noise was coming from. Even though it was just a rat, we took it as a sign to leave, and we briskly walked out of there. We decided to leave the warehouse entirely after this, and we never ever went back. I think there was only 1 or maybe 2 more nights at the warehouse, and either it died down or the cops found out about it. My friend ended up keeping the diary, but I'm not sure what he did with it. Either way, I'm glad we never ran into the crazed homeless man. This story happened to me when I was younger and began at the movie theater at our local shopping complex. Me and my friend were enjoying the film and having a good time when I happened to glance behind me and I noticed something. It was this guy. He was roughly the same age as us, and he was just looking at us with this intense stare. I quickly faced the movie again and I just tried to ignore it. I was starting to feel uneasy, so I decided to look behind me again, and still, the guy's eyes were locked on us. I turned around again and just watched the remainder of the film. The movie finished and we made our way out. The creepy guy was not far behind us, but there was only one way out, so it's not like he was stalking us. We made our way down the escalator, and once again I looked back to see if he was there, and there he was, only this time He was really close to us. I started to feel really anxious and I did not know what to do. He continued to follow us, but suddenly he was just gone. I felt so much relief. I could relax again. We left the shopping centre and headed for the train home, and we were about to go up some stairs. I turned around and suddenly noticed that this guy was once again following us, only this time he was sprinting towards us. I yelled at my friend and we sprinted up the stairs. He, however, was quickly catching us. We made it up the stairs and were running through the car park, and we decided to hide behind one of the cars in the hope that he would not find us. We stayed quiet, although I felt like my breathing was making so much noise, like he would be able to hear it and find us. I was trying to hold my breath. Suddenly, we heard footsteps. They were getting close. He was going to find us. I was so terrified in that moment. Just a jogger. I breathed a sigh of relief. We waited a little while longer, but there was no longer any sign of him. We caught the train home, and we were feeling at ease. I didn't know what the man wanted, but I'm super glad that we didn't find out. I was still so paranoid he may have been on that train, but thankfully he wasn't. This happened to me a few nights ago. I was taking my dog for his nightly walk. It was a bit of a windy night, but otherwise it was pretty standard. I've never had any trouble taking these walks, so I was pretty carefree and allowed my dog to walk without a leash. I've lived in this area for a few years, and at least from my experience, I considered it to be low on the number of weirdos, and it contained mostly good people. I was continuing to walk when out of nowhere I heard a voice from a man, and he asked me if I wanted to smoke, and he held out a packet of cigarettes. I was startled. I had no idea someone was even standing there. My dog took an instant disliking to the new stranger. I responded that I was okay, but I also thanked him for his offer. He didn't respond, and there was just an awkward pause, and he walked away. I continued on my walk, thinking nothing of the incident. Just some weirdo in the park, I thought to myself. But what I didn't realize was that this stranger was making his way back to me, and not just casually either. He was running, and he was quickly catching up to me. I awoke. I was very confused and feeling a lot of pain in my knee, but especially my neck. Thankfully, as soon as I was awake, my dog was there to comfort me. The mysterious man was gone. I have no idea what he wanted. He didn't take anything from me. Why was he strangling an innocent stranger in the park? These questions have unfortunately been left unanswered. I reported the incident to the police, but as they do not have much to go on, they were unable to catch the stranger in the park. I now, of course, only walk my dog during the day.